Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're investigating one of aviation's most tragic, absolutely devastating, and honestly, frustratingly preventable disasters. We're going to unpack the terrifying sequence of events that brought down ValuJet Flight 592, and more importantly, we're going to uncover the hidden, everyday failures that made it entirely inevitable. Okay, let's dive into this. How exactly did 5 boxes of quote-unquote empty oxygen canisters bring down a massive commercial airliner, right? It sounds like an impossible riddle, but the answer to this central mystery literally revolutionized how we understand workplace safety, accountability, and the very anatomy of a disaster.
Section 1. The Doomed Flight. The Unthinkable in the Everglades. So let's set the stage. In the aftermath of the 1980s airline deregulation, discount carriers like ValuJet heavily outsourced their maintenance to keep costs low. They used a company called SaberTech down in Miami. But those cost-saving measures eventually collided with unthinkable tragedy when ValuJet Flight 592 banked sharply and plunged nose-first into the Florida Everglades. Under the command of pilot Candlin Quebec, all 110 people on board lost their lives. 110 souls. The stakes of what we're about to discuss absolutely could not be higher.
Section 2. The oxygen canisters, a hidden hazard.
The root of this tragedy actually started far, far away from the cockpit. Inside a SaberTech hangar at Miami International Airport, mechanics were performing a completely routine task for ValuJet, replacing the passenger oxygen generator canisters in some of their DC-9 aircraft. Now, by design, these things don't hold pressurized gas. Instead, they contain a core of sodium chlorate. When you pull the oxygen mask towards you during an emergency, it triggers a tiny explosive charge. That little explosion activates the sodium chlorate, setting off a chemical reaction that liberates breathable oxygen for the passenger. Pretty neat, right? Now, what's really interesting about this is that during this normal chemical process, the surface temperature of the canister can reach a blistering 500 degrees Fahrenheit. That is incredibly hot. Now, when they're mounted above your seat, this extreme heat isn't a problem, mainly because the area is highly ventilated. But I want you to keep that 500-degree number in the back of your mind because it is absolutely critical to what happens next.
Section 3. A chain of mistakes. The domino effect begins. When investigators looked inside that SaberTech hangar, they didn't find some malicious movie villain plot. No, they found a series of incredibly mundane, lazy errors that slowly built a fatal trap. There was just a stark contrast between protocol and reality. See, ValuJet's strict maintenance protocol stated that when these canisters are removed, a bright yellow safety cap absolutely must be installed over the firing mechanism so the explosive charge can't accidentally go off. But the reality on the hangar floor? The mechanics doing the job didn't have any caps on hand. So instead of finding some, they just wrapped tape around where the caps should have been. And worse, they left them in 5 cardboard boxes on a shelf. And 2 mechanics actually went ahead and falsified the paperwork, signing off that the caps had been installed.
So those 5 boxes sat on a shelf for weeks. Eventually, a shipping clerk was simply told to clean up the area. Thinking they were company property, he prepped them to be shipped back to ValuJet. He rearranged the uncapped canisters end to end, tossed some highly flammable bubble wrap on top, sealed the cardboard boxes, and prepared them for shipping alongside some airplane tires. Without even realizing it, this clerk had just built a massive incendiary bomb.
Then came the fatal approvals. The shipping ticket incorrectly labeled the load as empty oxygen canisters, even though most of them were completely full. But here's the thing. Even as empty canisters, they contain toxic residue, making them hazardous waste. And ValuJet was not certified to carry hazardous waste. Yet, the ValuJet ramp agent accepted the load anyway. The flight's co-pilot, Richard Hazen, also looked at the load and the ticket, and he accepted it too. The entire safety net completely failed. Section 4. 6 minutes to tragedy, the catastrophic convergence. To make matters worse, the ground crew placed those boxes of canisters directly on top of the tires, lying flat on the bottom of the unventilated forward hold that's located underneath and right behind the cockpit. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. Minute 0, takeoff is completely normal. But just 6 minutes into the flight, the cascade begins. A beep on the PA system, a chirp on the voice recorder, a simultaneous pressure pulse. Investigators believe a jostled canister fired its explosive charge. The chemical reaction started, and trapped inside an unventilated cardboard box, the heat skyrocketed to 500 degrees. That intense heat burst a tire, which burned with thick, acrid smoke.
The fire melted the wiring beneath the cabin floor, causing a sudden electrical failure. As smoke choked the cabin, the pilots lost control of the aircraft, resulting in the fatal crash. Section 5. The Systemic Accident. How Small Lapses Create Huge Disasters. It's so easy to want to point the finger at one single villain, isn't it? The mechanic who lied, the clerk who packed them, the pilot who accepted them. But aviation investigators view this very differently. Flight 592 is a textbook systemic accident. So the crucial point is, this is a catastrophe made inevitable, not by a single massive failure, but by the devastating convergence of multiple, small, seemingly isolated mistakes. Just look at this incredible chain of lapses. No safety caps installed, improper packaging with flammable bubble wrap, the ramp agent allowing hazardous cargo, the co-pilot accepting it, an intense heat source placed right next to flammable tires, and finally, no heat or smoke detectors in the cargo hold to warn the crew in time. Here is the heartbreaking reality. If just one single person had done their job right, if literally any one of these mundane errors had been caught, the chain would have been broken and 110 people would still be alive today. The final section. Aftermath and industry changes, the fallout from Flight 592. The immediate consequences of this were severe. ValuJet's entire fleet was grounded by the FAA for months, and their brand was so irreparably damaged, they were eventually forced to rebrand as AirTran just to lure business back. But the legal fallout? That was truly unprecedented. The state of Florida hit SaberTech with 110 counts of murder and manslaughter. Initially, the jury found SaberTech guilty, which was the very first time a criminal guilty verdict had ever been returned against a corporation in the United States. But after appeals, many of these verdicts were thrown out. As for the 3 SaberTech employees facing criminal charges, one had their charges dropped entirely, and the other 2 were ultimately found not guilty. In the end, the corporation, SaberTech, agreed to plead no contest to a single count of mishandling hazardous materials, and they made a $500,000 donation to an airline safety fund. And really, that was the extent of the accountability. It was an outcome that deeply, deeply dismayed the families of the victims. Shortly after this, SaberTech simply went out of business completely. And this brilliantly illustrates the final, lasting safety legacy of Flight 592, the blood-written rule that came out of this tragedy. Because of this crash, the FAA issued a strict mandate. Heat and smoke detectors are now required in the cargo holds of all commercial airplanes. Never again would a fire grow silently beneath the feet of passengers and crew without an advanced warning right there in the cockpit. We've seen how tiny, overlooked corners cut in a routine maintenance hangar can bring down a massive airliner. It really forces us to look in the mirror. If disasters are truly systemic, what seemingly harmless, mundane mistakes are happening in your workplace right now that could be the first falling domino? Something to think about for sure. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope it gave you a totally new perspective.